What is the number one thing when you're looking for a successful SDR, Dan? What do you think is the most important characteristic for an SDR to have to be successful?
Amazing question, Matt. I think in my past years of an experience, what I've seen, some of the best SDRs that I've hired or grown are the one who's coming up with the seller mindset.
Mm.
Someone who thinks like a seller, someone who wants to be a seller, and someone can take the ownership of a territory like a seller. So these are the some traits I see them come as a seller, develop as a seller, and be a seller.
So explain to me that word. You used the word seller in the answer and the examples. Define what is a seller to you. How do you define that?
So, seller to me is someone who has an hunger to sell an idea to an audience or to a prospect.
Okay.
S- There are various SaaS products in the market, tangible, non tangible products. But someone who comes with the mindset that I can sell my idea about this particular product or service is the seller. Someone who's a hustler who can do anything and everything to sell that idea to the audience.
How do you y- for me, the interview process has always been something I've always been very curious about. I mean, I've obviously had an opportunity to interview hundreds of individuals in my time of leadership. But I always think that interviewing is probably one of the things that I think is probably overthought through. But if you're looking for people that have this seller mindset, what are ways you can ask questions or things that you can identify in the interview process to determine that there's a high likelihood that they actually have that?
Great question. So, in the interview process, right? I mean, we know as a matter of fact, when I talk about SDR as a function in GTM, right? The traditional SDR role, wherein it was majorly focused on pipeline generation or lead generation, right? How I differentiate whether this new individual that I'm hiring, right, have a beyond thinking. When I say beyond thinking, is only a
Mm.
pipeline creation is the mindset, or progressing a pipeline and closing that sourced opportunity towards the ACV is the mindset that differentiate. Another point that I look at the interview, right, is the way that an individual does the discovery and qualification of an opportunity. Sometimes we keep on focusing on qualifying something as an opportunity, but is an individual also looking at how we can disqualify something as an opportunity? That talks about that person is thinking way beyond the picture. And is a person is only focusing on their metric or the territory metric and organization metric that matters a lot, because that talks about the person has a big picture. That person is looking for an ACV. That person is looking for a territory growth. So these are some of the traits which tells me this person actually is coming up with the seller mindset.
Makes a lot of sense. I like the statement that you said, not just qualify, but also disqualify. I was having a
Uh-huh.
conversation with a couple of newer sellers yesterday. And um, one of the things I was trying to instill in them is I really want you to drive to the no. And she was like, "What? Like, you want me to get him to say no?" I'm like, I mean, I'd rather you get him to say yes. I mean, of course, but if we're not leading to a yes, I would like to get them to commit to a no. And I said, a lot of sellers I've worked with in the past try to avoid the no, but when you never get the no, you never get the objection. You never have an opportunity to then overcome that or kind of rephrase or reset the framework for the customer's thought process about what ultimately you're trying to solve for them in that process. And when you only go chase that yes train, which is a common thing people talk about, then you never actually, are able to attack and overcome the negative. How
Agreed.
do you kind of teach that process? Like we talk about developing and once we brought the right person in and having that seller mindset, do you have somebody chase the no, avoid the no, focus on the yes? I mean, what are your thought process?
Yeah. So when it comes to sales coaching, right? One, I am a pretty strong believer of a value selling. And when I say value selling, right, I mean, obviously there are hundreds of buyers sitting in that market. But every buyer is the one who's eligible for our product? That's a question mark. That is something could be assessed through a value selling. When you do a discovery with the prospect, right? You ask them what is their pain area, what is their present state, what is their future state they're looking forward, and matching that particular condition in an organization which our product is something tells a lot about whether our product is fit to it or not. That way you learn it. Are you really selling a product for the sake of selling, or you're actually adding a value to the organization? So that is something I coach my SDRs on, right? It's okay, right? It could be possible that you are reaching out to hundreds of people, and 50 of those people may look like that they are a strong opportunity, but you also need to look at and ask a right question whether this product can add a value in your organization or not. If it is not adding a value, it doesn't make sense to push sell that thing, because at the end this is not a kind of in sale that you will do done it, because you are creating a customer for a life, not just for that particular moment. So all that reinstatement, all that self-reflection, looking for a nudges to say no is something that asks people to do more discovery on in the early in the picture.
So, I think what's maybe good for our audience is, I mean, an SDR is a very common term in sales, right? And what I've learned over my years, and I'm sure you've learned the same, is how I might define, and in my mind, when I'm thinking of an SDR, I've got a certain framework of what that role is. And it doesn't mean that aligns with exactly what you think an SDR is, or maybe the way the organization that you're at would classify an SDR. So I think maybe what is good for us to do, in your current organization that you lead a team, define to me what is the role of an SDR.
Right. So just a bit of a context over here, because I've been into this industry since last 15 years. I think one role that I've seen who has gone through a major evolution in last 10 years is the SDR function in GTM. SDR role, it used to be what in last 10 years, it's totally different now, right? How the role is actually evolving as how we can work along with an AI and can bring the human element along with it. So talking about how I see and how my organization see the role of an SDR, we are actually a GTM strategist. When I say a GTM strategist, that means the role of an SDR is not just a pipeline generation, rather a qualified pipeline generation. We do not leave a hand of an AE while the pipeline is generated at stage one. We make sure every pipeline that we generate is progressing well ahead. That means to the stage two, stage three, all that stages, right? And we also make sure that SDRs also go through the whole cycle of sales so that they would understand what is a buyer journey, what are the challenges that market may be raising up right now, and they well align with the sales. So the component of SDR success in our organization is also the ACV, so that though in the traditional SDR organization, it will be more on opportunity creation and meeting generation, but we also wanted an SDR to be a part of a territory owner as an AE, so that they will also have a component of ACV growth along with it. So creation, progression, and a closure is something that we look at as a successful SDR in our organization.
Okay. Makes total sense. And see, that's why I wanted to define that, because for me, I typically classify an SDR, when I talk about it, I classify it everything up until an appointment. I think of an SDR typically is developing business to get them to show up to a presentation for an account executive to present and to then close the solution. And there's a lot of people that will say, I want an SDR to close deals. I want an SDR to be a full cycle seller. I want an SDR to do X, Y, or Z. And so knowing exactly how and why you define that is really important, because for me, an SDR, when I teach an SDR, I actually don't want them to know everything about the product, because for me, what I've found is that when an SDR knows more, they say more. And when they say more, they sell less. Because I'm trying to get them to sell the appointment, not the product, not the service, not the offering, not the outcome. Now, now, the account executive, which is kind of the defined role, I would say that might have the ability to do what I want an SDR to do, but also has the ability to then take that conversation and then present the solution, do the discovery in that. That's kind of the distinction I've always created. But it sounds like to me, based off your explanation, that an SDR and how you define it is more like what I define an AE to be. Is my explanation accurate to the way you understand it as well?
Yeah, I'll just add one context over here, right? If you see the modern uh, enterprises right now, the products there in the market, it's actually a platform. It's not a one particular use case that we are selling in the market, right? And I think someone great said one day that it requires a village to sell a product or a platform, right? So the power of an actual SDR comes in when they are also helping you in terms of multi-threading. It could be possible, right? We have opened up an opportunity right now wherein your AE is focused over there of that particular use case, while at the same time SDR can help in terms of multi-threading, opening up gates with the different departments, CFOs, CIOs, CISOs, all that department wherein we can sell platform as a story. And on the other side, that's where the power of an SDR gets come in. And the other side is SDRs are the one who's the front face who opened up the conversation. If they are being part of that conversation from the beginning until the end, the trust with the prospect always keeps on going. And at the same time, I have also seen in some of my opportunities wherein my SDRs were able to qualify partners also early in the picture. Wherein the market that I'm coming from, India, over here, partner plays a crucial role. Early we identify the partner, the velocity of deal is pretty faster. I always ask my SDRs, while you're doing a qualification of your deal, right, do ask a question: who's your preferred partner, who's your cloud partner? All that question helps us to identify the partners early. That way the velocity is even better, sales cycle has been reduced, and even we are selling platform as a story, not just as a one particular use case. So that's the power being identified so far.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't the role in which somebody does serves in a sales organization, I think as long as it's clear, it's defined, and it's outlined, I think that's more important, but that also changes the one of the original questions I asked you is like, what do you look for in a successful SDR? If you're looking for them to be the person who's having higher level qualifying questions with the CEO of an organization in a technical conversation, that requires a much larger skill set. And to your point, that requires somebody who has different capabilities than somebody who might be more of a junior seller. Now, the way I build out my sales organizations, Dan, is I build out my sales organizations and say that I typically don't care to hire people with some like massive resume or a ton of experience. I actually like to bring in what I would classify junior sellers. They start off in an SDR role. For me, an SDR role is somebody who's appointment setting and selling the appointment only. That could be in a cold calling, it could be in a warm calling, it could be in an inbound leads capacity, you name it. The first thing I want them to get good at is sell the appointment. The next phase of the roles is for me as a junior AE. And a junior AE is typically somebody who can sell appointments, but then do the discovery. And then from there, they roll into what I would classify as a full cycle AE, so that you get the appointments, you discovery, and then you sell. And then I believe the fourth stage of a seller for me would be a sales engineer. And that's somebody who has a technical level of expertise that isn't necessarily involved in the day-to-day presentation, the day-to-day relationship building. They're a hired gun who comes in to really speak at a high level technically to be able to explain the ins and outs of the product that aligns with the um, issues the AE and SDR have created in the conversation, allowing the AE to manage the relationship. So for me in that scenario, the AE is the person who's established, built the credibility, the relationship, and is going to run that sales cycle front to back. And why I've liked to go that route is because I believe that my biggest distinct advantage to the marketplace is I believe I can develop people at a better rate than most of my other kind of peers in the space. To where a lot of the peers in the space that I've worked with would much prefer hiring that guy who's been successful somewhere else and say, let me draw from the success they've had there, bring them into my organization. I can plug and play that aspect. There's one thing that I've learned in my time of leadership is that there's not one single way to be successful, but understanding who you are as a leader, your strengths, your advantages, your disadvantages change the offense in which you run. As I lay out kind of the framework I build out for the majority of the organizations and how and why I build out my sales team, I'd love to hear kind of your framework around that aspect. And I know you currently work at a specific organization, but let's say you left that organization, you went to a new organization, and they said, Dan, how is the best way for me to get results in the next 90 days? How would you structure it?
Yeah, great question. Well, if you say, I mean, if you're looking for results in 90 days, right? Obviously, I'll look for the available playbooks in that particular niche market, in that particular niche product area that will actually help me to understand the market more. But from a people angle, right? 100%, I think I would follow the traditional model of having placed marketing function, SDR coming into the picture, A is there, SE is there to support in. Then we have the account manager to nurture and expand the accounts and everything. That's the model I would follow. But one thing that I would love to keep it, because I see that might be a gap, is in the system that everyone, whether it's a marketing, whether it's a SC function, sales engineers, or whoever it is in the part of the sales role, everyone owns the pipeline creation and the revenue. What that happens if you have a common metric among all the different teams working towards the GTM, they all are aligned well, they all collaborate well. And I've seen the in my previous journeys, in my previous experience, I've seen the results are better and faster in that way. I think that is something that I'll make sure there is at least one or two metric which is common among all the departments, and that will make sure there is a faster results and there is a greater collaboration among each departments.
Okay, so let's double click on that because it's not that I disagree, but I think let me give you a second, a different train of thought. Um, if you have everybody who owns the pipeline, that was your statement, right? Everybody owns the pipeline. Um, how do you then hold accountable when a ball gets dropped if everybody's owning the pipeline?
Double tap on
Let's
when,
say
what do
we
you mean
don't hit
by?
our goals.
Okay.
Everybody owns the pipeline, but we don't hit our goal. And there's a weak link. There's a strong link, but a weak link. If everybody's owning the outcome, how does that conversation have? How do you look at that as a leader that says, this is a different conversation versus the alternative, which might be is everybody has a part to play. And if we're all owning our part to play, the outcome of owning the pipeline to me falls on the sales leader, not the specialist at their part. But explain to me, not that I'm wrong, but why you look at it differently.
Correct. Uh, Yeah, that's again a good question. And Matt, I mean, my perspective in this is when I say a pipeline creation, right, a metric of a pipeline creation to be owned by each department, right, I'll just double confirm in that. I mean, that will be a kind of a leading indicator, right, for me.
Okay.
So if every department has that as a leading indicator, the other metrics which matters for each department is more better. The reality is 100% SDR will own the maximum of that number. That means if in an organization wherein the SDR function is full-fledged, I've seen somewhere near 40 to 50% of a pipeline is coming from the SDR and marketing as a function. The rest is coming from the other department. But what I mean, everyone should own a pipeline. For example, right? I've seen if SDRs is generating 50% of your pipeline, right? And if an AE also contribute 20, 25% in the pipeline, if sales engineer also contribute in terms of a pipeline generation, that could be in terms of generating new use cases, right? And account manager also helps in terms of pipeline generation post sales, that make sure we never go dry on pipeline, because sometime it happen, right? If you're too dependent, I know that you have amazing SDR function, everything is so good, you're too dependent on the SDR function of pipeline generation. If something happens, goes up and down, the whole pipeline goes dried up and the
Yeah.
entire organization goes and suffers. So
Okay.
that way
I
it's
get what you're saying.
important that way.
Okay. I understand. So you're saying making sure everybody plays a part in filling in the front end of the pipeline, not necessarily the outcome at the end of the pipeline, as in, if we've got to hit 20 deals within this month, if we don't hit 20, everybody owns that outcome or that solution. I mean, and look, at the end of the day, we as a sales organization be driving towards the outcome in that sense. I completely agree with you in that sense. And that's, for me, why everybody in organizations that I build starts at a very similar spot. Everybody starts for me, no matter what you've done, no matter who you are. The first thing you do in my organization and a sales team that I run is you have to be an SDR. And I don't care if you've been selling for 20 years. The first 90 days is you prove to me that at any point in time, no matter how bad everybody else sucks in the organization, you can go put food on your plate as an account executive, as a sales engineer. So I never have to hear about, well, Johnny, my SDR, didn't get me enough meetings this month. That's why I can't close deals. Well, good news is I already know you know how to go set appointments yourself, and that's why I stair step those tasks. So even though I might bring somebody in that might be an amazing closer, they come in as an SDR, they hit certain measures, they grow to become a junior AE, they hit certain measures, they grow to become an AE, they grow to become a sales engineer, but they've mastered each step of the process no matter where they go. And that's the exact reason why I do that. So it sounds like we actually agree on the premise. How we get there and how we stair step people may be different, but the premise I agree with totally. Now, let me ask you this, because one of the other things that I think is very interesting is, how do you align comp with organization to get the outcome? And I know you're at a certain organization today, and once again, maybe that comp structure in that you currently work in is exactly how you'd set it up if you went everywhere else. I fundamentally believe that SDRs should be comped primarily based off of their shows, and about 80% of, if their role and task is to get people to show up, then 80% of their comp should be tied to what they can control without the outcome factoring in. 20% should be factored into the outcome so that we still factor in quality. I think that AE should be factored in exclusively off of their deals that they close, but they should have a quota of how many appointments they set every single month. And I think that sales engineers should be factored in off of their closing rate when they get asked to come in. So if they are asked to come in, they should close at a certain percentage, and they get a certain percentage of the deals that they come in to do. How do you believe a sales organization should be set up for comp? First, your sales team, and then as a sales leader, how should that align?
Yeah. So from a comp perspective, Matt, it's totally dependent on the maturity of an organization, right? There are organizations who maybe wanted to land fast and wanted to close anything and everything as soon as possible. So that way it will be more dependent on the number of net new logos, the number of the amount of an ACV that's coming in, right? And if an organization which is more mature, they will go product specific, they will go use case specific, right? The comp would be on, right? If you go 50% of your comp is on the number of logos and ACV, rest 50% of your comp would be dependent on if you open up a pipeline for me with this XYZ product. That way you get the accelerator coming into it.
Right.
So it depends on the maturity of it. That's what I believe in. And coming from the SDR background, I think I'll just talk about some of my past background, something I've seen a pretty change in the comp for the SDR world. Though the reality is what's in control of an SDR is the pipeline creation, right? That's I would 100% agree to it. But at the same time, we know, as a matter of fact, the pipeline creation is done. We also want an SDR or someone to own the progression of a pipeline. So I've seen in one of my past organization wherein 70% of the pipeline, 70% of the comp was dependent on the pipe creation. Rest 30% is on the progression. That means how many of a portion that you have sourced has moved stage 3 plus? How many of that has been moved to a negotiation stage, so that they will also have the ownership? Because we know, as a matter of fact, only one meeting or or two meeting will not drive us a closure. We need hundreds of people to be aligned in that opportunity for us to close it. So SDR will keep prospecting that way. That is the behavior it will drive. Now, coming to your other question is on the comp for the leadership, right? There has to be obviously some part of an AE and SDR comp will be a part of a leader comp, but something has to be dependent on the OKR of an organization. It could be possible my APJ organization has an OKR to drive incremental revenue for this XYZ use case. So how much pipeline I as a leader is contributing towards that use case matters. So that is something should be a comp for a leader, so that leader can drive it at that end. So I'm not saying not the 100% of it. If a 70% is same as an AE, but that 30% should also be attached to the OKR of that particular organization and function, so that we can drive it beyond just the basic comms which is required for the role success.
Now, I know every organization is different in that, the size of the organization, the scope of the leadership role. Do you believe that where they can, an organization is best served to also have a personal sales number on the head of a leader? Or do you think that their role should be focused on the outcome of the organization in which they lead, not their individual ability to close deals? Do you believe there's a better approach in a general capacity?
Yeah. Again, amazing question. I will talk in both the sense what could be pros and cons at the other side and the other side.
Sure.
So if an individual, if as a leader, right, is a player coach. I mean, I put it in the bracket of player coach, wherein the person has a team target and an individual target, right? Sometimes people are so good in managing putting their legs on both the shoes, and they do excel that way. But I've seen there is a lot of people are not able to manage it well, wherein they are get confused, because coaching an individual to close a deal, a number, is a different ball game, and closing a deal by yourself is a different ball game altogether. So sometimes people do get confused that way. So my recommendation would be, if you are a leader, you should be owning a team's number. You should be owning a country's number or region's number. If obviously 100% a player coach role will be there in some bit pieces, because I've seen a lot of sales leaders, though they don't own that as a account, they do take an ownership on closing deal by themselves because they like doing so. But from a comp perspective, it should not be individual target, and team target should be a completely a leader, a team target overall should be there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many different ways you can look at it. And I've seen that, so often sales organizations, I think, make the most common mistake, which is I'm going to take my best seller and make them my leader. And that doesn't necessarily, in most cases, doesn't translate to success. And when then you do that, but then you expect your leader to close a certain amount of deals, now they're in a position where they can ultimately close deals instead of empowering their employees to close those deals. And if they've got a number on their head, then they're not giving those said deals, or they're cherry picking the easy deals. To me, I think that it absolutely creates more issues than it benefits. Now, look, the reality is, I think that every sales leader should be a leader and be able to
Mm.
lead from the front. And I think that one of the challenges you as an organization have to juggle with is, do I put so much focus on my leader closing deals that they then take away from the leadership side of them coaching their reps to be able to see the success, versus if I don't have a number on their head, are they going to not lead from the front and close deals and completely depend on if they hit a number or not? It's all on their team. I think it's definitely a fine line. I think in an ideal world, you have a leader that doesn't need to have a number on their head, but still is out there closing deals, but doesn't take credit for closing any deals because
Right.
they don't need to take credit. They're out there in the trenches with their guys, proofing what they say works in reality, but they're not in competition with their employees. It's just having the right leader in place who's willing to do them without having to do those things is kind of really the difference I've seen.
100% agree. And I think it's very well articulated, Matt. I think you and me, both coming from a sales background, we have seen a lot many times a person who used to be a amazing President's Club winner, amazing in terms of closing deals, and we have seen they are not being a good leader, because the reality is someone who's good as a leader may not be very good at closing deals or higher at the numbers, but someone who's a mediocre performer have always shown up to be a good leader in terms of coaching and evolving people.
Yeah, and it's easy to lay that picture out that we just mentioned when you're a homegrown, developed, promoted leader from an organization within. Now, and I don't know, Dan, if you've had this challenge yet where you've been brought in externally, brought in as a leader and having to take over an existing sales team. And the biggest piece of advice I would give that leader is ask the organization, can I actually go head down selling for 30 days to prove that I am worth leading this team? Because without that, you're going to have a lot of trouble having that team wanting to follow you if you're not
Mm.
willing to get in the trenches. But knowing that having your team know that everything you ask them to do, you can do, that you will do, that you'll not ever ask them to do something you can't do yourself, man, I could tell you that is one of the most important things that if you ever want to take over an existing sales team, you have to be willing to do, because there's organizations I've been at, Dan, and hopefully you haven't, but there's organizations I've been at that I look at my leader and know he could never walk a day in my shoes. And he never would walk a day in my shoes because he's never been asked to. But if he couldn't. And that's the last type of leader you want to be if you're in a leadership position. What are your thoughts on that?
100% agree. I think in my past role, I've been into that situation wherein I've joined an organization as a leader, not grown up from there, right? I have seen that, and I know what kind of challenges it brings in. First of all, 100% people follow or wanted to be a coach or by someone who they have seen grown within them, because that way they've seen the struggles that person has gone through, and whatever perspective that person will have is a valid perspective because the person has gone through the same thing. I too believe that, but at the same time, I think I even liked your comment on that, right? If anyone in such kind of a situation joining in that company, right, it's good that that person should first take a hat of that individual contributor, be there, understand what's the ground reality, understand the pain area, right? That way you literally lead by example, showcase, hey, I'm doing this. And I think one thing I also like, I mean, one of my mentor taught me this: whatever level you are, whether you are a manager, director, VP, or CRO, right? You should never fade away in terms of picking up the phone, dialing, and closing a deal by yourself. That way, you keep yourself grounded, because market is ever evolving, right? It's the need of the hour. Your title may say a leader, but you also need to know the market reality, because at the end, what sellers does at the ground is the harsh reality maybe a CRO may not able to know. But if a
Yeah.
CRO who actually makes a call and go to the customer meeting by themselves would know what actually a seller goes through.
Yeah, if
So
they
I
don't
think if
run their own
this
sales cycle, then you'll never truly be able to put yourself in the shoes of your employee that you're managing and coaching and develop if you've actually never run that sales cycle. So, I mean, look, it's natural as a leader for you to be like, I made it. I've been hired as the CRO or the head of sales or whatever your fancy title is. And you're like, I'm past that part in my life. And I would guess most sales leaders aren't scared to pick up the phone. It's they just feel like they're above it at a certain point in their life. But at the end of the day, I just caution you, if you are that leader and you're unwilling to jump on the phone, man, you will never have the true full respect of your team, especially an inherited team. They need to be able to see you walk the walk, not hear you talk the talk. Now, very different if you're hiring a team in and you're going through the interview process. Those people, I think, are less needing to see you do it. But when you're taking over a team, and I'm like, I've already been here, man, I should have got that role. I should have been the manager. That, man, that's the real difficult part of taking over. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and we kind of already mentioned it earlier. Um, I'm at that unique age, like physical age, that I've had, I would say, the blessing of being able to be a full-time employee before cell phones were incredibly prevalent. So I'm 42, about to be 43. I grew up in a world where internet was not day-to-day life until like I was in middle school or even in high school to where it was very prevalent. I grew up in a world where cell phones, we had them like when I was 18, but they weren't iPhones, right? I grew up in a world of sales where you had to go a different route. Um, and then I grew up in a world before there was AI, and there's been an evolution and change and shift in every one of those steps. And I think probably from a business perspective, each one of those, the advent of the internet, then the advent of the cell phone, the advent of virtual ability, all of those things have probably changed business drastically. And I would argue that AI is going to change them as much, if not more than any of those other aspects. So, what our job is today is different than what it was 5 years ago. And I think the exponential growth due to AI will be rapid. Um, right now, Dan, what are you looking at and saying just in the next 6 months, by the end of 2026, what are you anticipating will need to be different than even what your job, role, company is today? What are you anticipating?
I think as an AI coming to the picture, there is a, I would rather say, a buzzword everywhere. Everyone is scared about their role, whether their role will get impacted. Other thing is companies are also thinking, do we need this much of an headcount for us to drive that particular revenue, right? All that conversation is coming up. Lately, I was reading up a report by Deloitte, and I really like the terminology and all the research is being over there. And I myself is the a researcher in the AI world who's researching in the same area, how AI is evolving, how the GTM function would be looking like in the coming years. And I will summarize my entire research and all the reports that I've read that the future of uh, of us would be human led and AI powered. It's such a powerful word and sentence. That means though AI is there, we need to learn AI. There is a lot of things. I can give an example from an SDR function perspective. I remember my SDRs in earlier days used to spend a lot of time on doing research, drafting an email, drafting a sequences. That all operation things is no more required. AI can do it. At the same time, we know that AI is not a human. There is in sales one element which is required, which will always be required, is the human element. That even though an AI can generate a lot of things for you, can automate a lot of things for you, but that personalization, the nuances of a market, the nuances of a persona is something is the human led thing. So the future of the businesses would be human led and AI driven, wherein we need to learn how we can use AI towards our benefits. 100% that I too agree with the fact that with an AI coming up into the picture, the productivity from the same resources has gone up. So companies are thinking, do we need that much resource? We may not require a team of 12 SDRs or 12 sellers. Maybe the job of those 12 could be done within the 8 or 9 resources. So that is actually in 30% increase in the productivity and 30% reduction in the headcount. That is something I'm seeing up, but not the entire role getting eliminated. The more we know the way how to use the AI towards our benefit, we're going to go ahead and survive the way ahead.
So I'd say about 90% of what you just said, I agree with. Okay. Let me give you the points because I think it's more interesting for me to talk about what I disagree with than what I agree with. Okay. And I'm evolving on this thought process too. And so for people who listen to me, like there's been a pretty large evolution for me in this process. I would tell you for the past 6 months, I've asked this question pretty commonly, and a lot of the conversations I have are in the automotive industry, Dan. I mean, that's the industry in which I generally come from. And the big conversation in the automotive industry is, will ultimately AI be able to replace the human element in the general interaction of selling a vehicle? And the dealership landscape is always kind of aligned with your statement of the human element will always be required. I don't agree. Now, look, will there need to be some sort of human oversight on the AI? Yeah. Um, but I don't believe that an organization will need sellers. I believe they might need an AI engineer who has understands the sales philosophy and understands how to program the AI philosophy or the sales process and the digestion of that process into the AI. But I don't think we have more than 5 years before AI will be able to do everything my sales team can do better than my sales team can too, without missing days, without being sick, without having all the other stuff. I mean, and I think it'll be generally indistinguishable. Now, I think that the challenge we have is not whether the organizations will adopt to that process. It's generally going to be on the adaptation of the consumer. And I have a fundamental belief that the consumers will always go the direction of what's easier, less expensive, and that has trust. And I think that our general society will adapt to being completely comfortable. If we just stick to the selling side, being sold through an AI, I think can be generally delivered and executed in a way that is more trusting and is easier and is more simple and is cheaper when companies have the ability to go that route. And I think for that reason, if you're somebody who's in sales and you're not every single day investing 30 to 60 minutes into how can I learn every aspect of sales, I think you're making a huge mistake. Now, there will still need to be human logic. There will still need to be human understanding, and somebody like myself and even somebody like you, Dan, who has an experience in structuring, building, organizing, training, and developing, it's just going to be, in my opinion, that we're doing that with the AI and not individuals. So as I give that explanation, I would love to hear from you. I don't agree. What do you see differently? Because look, I hope I'm wrong. I
Yeah.
like developing and coaching people, but I have a fundamental belief that majority of what I'll be coaching and developing will be systems in the next 5 years. Where am I wrong?
Yeah, so I partially agree and partially disagree. So
Okay, good.
the partially agree, I mean, that's true. The future of sales leadership that they will be also be leading AI co-pilots. So AI individuals is something we'll be leading. For example, in my role, right, I could say that I'll be maybe handling bots who's like handling a inbound request for me, right? But at the same time, I do have one of the example in my previous organization, right? We know, as a matter of fact, you and me, right, we receive hundreds of email in our inbox daily, and we can easily get this is an AI driven email because similar kind of an email is coming from a lot of people, right? I remember some of the campaigns that we ran back in my previous organization was handwritten letters, wherein we know, as a matter of fact, we are more faster in terms of doing an email outreach. The response rate of an email outreach has gone down traditionally because people know it's an AI generated.
Hmm.
And the traditional method wherein people are handwritten letters are being sent to the prospect, the higher response rates are coming up. I know the bot can write the handwritten letter the
Yeah, I was going
same
to
way
say,
as a
like, you
human.
can have the computer robot hand write a letter from a automated letter writing process.
Correct. I know that you will be coming up with this thought too, right? But again, the idea is the messaging, right? The actual human writing and actual bot writing is a way different, and people can identify some of the successful campaign that I had
But
seen
but
in
but
my.
let me push back,
Hmm,
Dan.
hmm.
I agree with you. Today, they can identify it. Today, they can differentiate that. But I'm talking about 5 years from now. I anticipate that it will be indistinguishable to human and likely better than human. I'll give you another example. I'm going to give you this example, and it freaked me out, and I'm sure it'll freak you out if it happens to you. So I've got a whole marketing team. I've got a whole team behind me, tech team that does all this fun stuff with me, right? They, out of nowhere, without my permission, I'm okay that they did it, but without my permission, They created a video of me in this seat with this outfit, not this outfit, but with this outfit saying something I never said in my voice with my lips moving, and I never had said it. And it was indistinguishable today to me saying it. So, and I said, can I then take that and have it create a personalized message, automated based off of this? They said, yeah, we can take your Read AI conversation that was recorded off the meeting that you had, that can then put that into a transcript, that can recap that can then create a recap conversation, and then we can ingest it into a script that would then have you sitting at your desk sending a personalized thank you video message to the customer based off of what you discussed and the further actions that came out of it. And none of it has to be you, and we need zero input from you. That could be done today, right now. So if we don't think that in 5 years they can create a video, a handwritten letter that can mirror that times 10, I think that a little bit of not a little bit of underestimating it. So sorry to cut you off. That's just giving you that perspective.
Agree 100%. I mean, the way the AI is evolving, right? You never know what next would come in, right? But I still do agree the human element would be required. See, we know that in the commercial world, wherein the sales cycles are shorter, wherein the decision making is quick, people may go ahead and sign a contract with a bot. But in the enterprise world, right, wherein they do come up with their own research they know about the vendors available, but they do expect to talk to a human coming to their office, human telling them, because we know, as a matter of fact, right, the people, at least right now, right, people expect that people connection, because one thing that bot may not able to do, or AI cannot able to do, is the emotion, right? We are human. We require emotional angle to everything. I think that is something is non-replaceable. Even it could be possible down the line, 5, 10 years, AI may shock me, but at this moment, I don't think so. It's coming up, and that would require 100% in the enterprise segment going forward.
Yeah, look, there will be places that people will be needed. That will be that VIP boutique experience that is for the very unique, in my opinion. But I think that, and once again, it all changes based off of what you're selling, what your product is, who your customer base is, the simplicity of the discussion and the solution. But I think in general, if we look at it in a broad perspective, I would guess 75 to 80% of the sales roles that you see in today's landscape will be able to be managed through AI. Now, that doesn't mean that we're all going to be out of work, and I don't have that doomer mentality. I just believe what we do will be different. The things that will be created from this will change, and I think that if you are somebody, like if I had to give advice to a 15-year-old version of myself today, if I fast forwarded myself back to 15, not fast forward, but if I put myself as 15 years old in today's landscape, the thing I would say is spend an hour or 2 hours learning everything you can about how you can make AI better your life. I think the people who really, really study and understand that are going to have such a distinct advantage over the rest of the general population who's just walking through their day surviving. And so that would be my piece of advice. All right. So, Dan, that covers it for us. Before we go, we covered a lot. We covered how we hire SDRs, how we develop them, how should we pay them, how should we manage them, coach them, how AI will come into play. What did I miss that you wanted to talk about or would like to talk about just based off of where our conversation has gone that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet?
I think we've covered most of it. I think one advice that I wanted to give it to the people who are listening to this podcast, especially the sellers, especially the sales leaders. I think one advice is like always have an attitude of learning. I think the way the market is evolving, the way AI is coming to the picture, the best way that we can keep ourselves relevant to the market is the more and more we learn, the more and more we upgrade ourselves. That is the best way going forward. So, I mean, that's the only thing that I want to give as an advice. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Don't be scared of AI. Don't be intimidated of it. Definitely don't act like it's not there and it's going to go away. It's not, guys. It is going to take over our general lifestyle. And from 95% of people, it will make our lives significantly better, easier, will be intelligent, more intelligent, and access to information will be there. But no different than how you would learn a calculator and how to let a calculator help you with math. Make sure that you learn how to let AI help you with whatever you're doing in life. And I'm scared for some of the youth who've never had to critically think before AI, and they'll let AI do the critical thinking for them. My challenge for anybody who's using it is learn how to critically think and let AI be a benefit to your critical thinking. Don't lean on AI to do your thinking, because I think that is going to be the biggest gap that we have in our general society, are people who know how to think versus people who count on technology to do their thinking for them. Any last words, Dan, before we go?
All good. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for listening it. I'm looking forward to learn from more people. I mean, you guys can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I would love to share and have exchange words there. Thank you.
Perfect. And we'll obviously put all of how you can get in contact with Dan, how you can follow him and all of his content moving forward in the bio. By all means, like, subscribe, watch, share, get it out in front of as many people as possible. Until next time, guys, we'll talk soon.